Entire time. Do you lose faith in humanity?
You know, I think that as you get older, you realize that there are very few really important.
At 83, after decades of commanding both the courtroom and the television screen, Judge Judy Sheindlin finally breaks a silence on a topic that has long fascinated fans and critics alike: her salary. For years, speculation swirled around just how much the sharp-tongued, no-nonsense judge earned for presiding over some of the most memorable small claims cases in television history. Her show, Judge Judy, became a cultural phenomenon, drawing millions of viewers daily and cementing her status as one of the most recognizable figures in entertainment. Yet behind the success, the numbers she now reveals tell a story that is far more complex and, in her own words, surprisingly insulting. From the outside, her career seemed like the ultimate success story. A former family court judge who transitioned into television and built an empire, she redefined what courtroom programming could be. Her sharp wit, quick decisions, and unapologetic demeanor resonated with audiences who admired her ability to cut through excuses and deliver justice with precision. Over time, her influence grew, and so did the perception that she was among the highest-paid figures on television. Reports over the years suggested staggering figures, numbers that seemed to place her in a league of her own. But as she reflects at 83, the truth she shares challenges the assumptions people have held for decades. She describes the early negotiations with networks as a turning point, moments when she realized that value in television is not always measured fairly. Despite the massive rating success of Judge Judy, she recalls feeling that the compensation she initially received did not reflect the true impact of her work. The show was not just another program. It was a cornerstone of daytime television, a reliable draw that generated significant revenue for networks and advertisers alike. Yet, in those early stages, she says the offers felt disproportionately small compared to what the show was bringing in. It was a realization that would shape her approach to business for the rest of her career. What makes a revelation particularly striking is not just the number itself, but the perspective behind it. She explains that insulting does not necessarily mean low in absolute terms, but rather inadequate in relation to the value created. It is a reminder that success is often accompanied by negotiations, compromises, and moments where individuals must advocate for their worth. In her case, those moments became defining experiences, pushing her to take control of her contracts and demand a level of compensation that matched her contribution. Over time, she became known not just for her courtroom authority, but for her business acumen, a woman who understood her value and refused to settle for less today. As she recounts these experiences, there is a sense of clarity that comes with hindsight. She speaks candidly about the challenges of navigating an industry that often underestimates talent, particularly when it comes in unconventional forms. A courtroom show led by a former judge was not initially seen as a guaranteed success, and that uncertainty influenced how networks approached her compensation. But as the show grew into a phenomenon, the imbalance became impossible to ignore. Her decision to renegotiate, to assert her worth, and to ultimately secure one of the most lucrative deals in television history was not just a personal victory. It was a statement about the importance of recognizing and demanding fair value. Beyond the numbers, her story reveals a deeper truth about success and perception. To the public, her wealth and influence seemed undeniable, almost mythical. But behind that image was a series of strategic decisions, hard-fought negotiations, and moments of doubt that shaped her journey. She emphasizes that what people see on the surface rarely tells a full story. The salary she now discusses, and the way she describes it, serves as a reminder that even the most successful individuals face challenges in being properly valued. Her reflections also touch on the broader implications of her experience. She acknowledges that her ability to renegotiate and ultimately secure better terms came from a position of strength that not everyone has. It raises questions about how many others, in various industries, accept compensation that does not reflect their true worth simply because they lack the leverage to demand more. In sharing her story, she hopes to highlight the importance of self-advocacy, of understanding one's value, and of being willing to challenge systems that fail to recognize IT today. As the narrative unfolds, it becomes clear that her legacy extends far beyond the courtroom or the television screen. Judge Judy Sheindlin is not just a figure of authority and entertainment, but a symbol of resilience and empowerment. Her journey from feeling undervalued to becoming one of the most influential and well-compensated figures in media is a testament to the power of persistence and self-belief. The insulting salary she refers to is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a larger narrative about recognizing one's worth and fighting to have it acknowledged in the end. Her revelation is less about a specific number and more about a mindset. It challenges viewers to reconsider how value is defined, how success is measured, and how individuals can take control of their own narratives. At 83, her words carry the weight of experience, offering insight into a life that has been anything but ordinary. The story of her salary, surprising as it may be, is ultimately a story about empowerment, resilience, and the enduring pursuit of fairness in a world that does not always offer it willingly. As she continues to reflect on the realities behind her success, Judge Judy Sheindlin offers a deeper glimpse into the turning points that redefine not only her career, but her entire relationship with power and value in the entertainment industry. What once felt insulting was not simply about numbers. It was about recognition, about understanding how easily even the most impactful work can be underestimated when it doesn't fit traditional expectations. In the early years of Judge Judy, she recalls walking into negotiations where executives saw her as replaceable, as just another personality in a crowded television landscape. But she knew something they didn't yet fully grasp, that her authenticity, her authority, and her connection with audiences were not easily replicated. That realization became a quiet turning point. Instead of accepting the limits others tried to place on her, she began to approach her career with a sharper sense of control. She studied contracts, asked harder questions, and refused to be rushed into decisions that didn't align with her worth. It was a shift from being a participant in the system to becoming someone who could shape it. And as ratings for Judge Judy continued to soar, the balance of power slowly began to change. The same executives who once dictated terms found themselves negotiating with a woman who understood her leverage better than anyone else in the room. She describes one particular moment, one that would later become almost legendary, when she was presented with a contract offer that she felt still failed to reflect her true value. Rather than argue point by point, she took a bold and unconventional approach. She wrote down the number she believed she deserved and placed it in front of the decision-makers, leaving little room for debate. It was not arrogance, she insists, but clarity. She had spent years proving her worth, and now she was simply asking for it to be recognized. That moment, she suggests, was when everything changed. It marked the transition from being underpaid and underestimated to becoming one of the most powerful figures in television. Yet even as her earnings eventually reached levels that stunned the industry, she never forgot those early experiences. The feeling of being undervalued stayed with her, shaping not only how she approached her own career, but how she viewed the broader system. She speaks candidly about the imbalance that still exists in many industries, where individuals who create immense value are not always compensated fairly, particularly in the beginning. Her story, she emphasizes, is not unique. It is simply more visible because of her platform. There is also a sense of irony in how her salary became a headline in itself. For years, reports of her earnings painted a picture of extraordinary wealth, often without context. What those reports failed to capture, she explains, was a journey that led there, the negotiations, the risks, the moments of doubt, and the determination required to reach that point. The insulting salary she refers to is part of that journey, a reminder where she started and how far she had to push to achieve what she ultimately did. As she speaks, there's a clear message that extends beyond her personal story. It is about ownership of one's work, one's value, and one's narrative. She encourages others to recognize their worth early, to question systems that undervalue them, and to have the courage to demand more when necessary. It is advice shaped by experience, delivered with the same directness that made her a household name. Looking back, the success of Judge Judy is no longer just a story of ratings or revenue. It is a story of transformation, of a woman who entered an unfamiliar industry, faced initial underestimation, and ultimately reshaped the terms on which she was valued. Her journey reflects a broader truth about success, that it is not just about talent or opportunity, but about the willingness to stand firm in the face of doubt and to insist on being recognized for what you bring to the table. At 83, her perspective carries a sense of finality, but also a purpose. She is not revealing these details to boast or to revisit past grievances, but to offer insight, to pull back the curtain on a side of success that is rarely discussed. The numbers themselves, no matter how surprising, are secondary to the lesson they represent. And that lesson is clear. Value is not something that is given freely. It is something that must be understood, asserted, and At times, fought for in the end, the story of Judge Judy Sheindlin and a so-called insulting salary becomes something far more meaningful than a headline. It becomes a testament to resilience, strategy, and self-worth, a reminder that even at the highest levels of success, the journey is often defined not by what you are given, but by what you are willing to demand. As the story reaches its final reflections, the voice of Judge Judy Sheindlin carries a tone not of frustration, but of clarity and understanding shaped by decades of experience, negotiation, and unwavering self-belief. At 83, she no longer feels a need to prove anything to anyone. The numbers, the contracts, the headlines, they are all part of a past that she now views with certain detachment. What matters more is the lesson behind them, the deeper truth about value that her journey has revealed. The success of Judge Judy was never accidental, and neither was the transformation of her position within the industry. It was a result of persistence, awareness, and the courage to challenge what she believed was unfair. She reflects on how easily people misunderstand success, assuming that those at the top have always been there, or that their path was straightforward. But her story, like so many others, was filled with moments of uncertainty, times when the outcome was far from guaranteed. The insulting salary she speaks of becomes symbolic of those early struggles, a reminder that even the most successful figures often begin from a place of being underestimated. It is a reality that resonates far beyond television, touching on the universal experience of striving to be seen, heard, and valued. There is also a quiet acknowledgement of how much the industry itself has changed. When she first entered television, the idea of a courtroom show led by a strong, authoritative woman was far from conventional. Expectations were different, opportunities were limited, and the structures in place did not always favor those who stood outside the norm. Yet it was precisely her ability to defy those expectations that made her indispensable. Over time, what was once seen as unconventional became essential, and the very qualities that had been underestimated became the foundation of her success. In these final moments of reflection, she speaks not just as a television icon, but as someone who has navigated the complexities of power and perception. She understands now that value is often invisible at first, that it takes time, persistence, and proof before it is recognized. And even then, recognition is not guaranteed. It must often be demanded. This understanding, she suggests, is what ultimately allowed her to reshape her career, turning what once felt like an insulting offer into an opportunity to redefine her worth on her own terms. Her story also carries a subtle but powerful message about independence. By taking control of her negotiations, by refusing to accept terms that did not reflect her contribution, she set a precedent not just for herself, but for others in the industry. She became an example of what is possible when individuals assert their value with confidence and clarity. It is a lesson that extends far beyond entertainment, applicable to anyone who has ever felt undervalued or overlooked. As the narrative draws to a close, there is a sense of completeness, not because every question has been answered, but because the journey itself has come full circle. The woman who once felt underpaid and underestimated now looks back on a career with a sense of accomplishment and understanding. The challenges she faced, the decisions she made, and the risks she took all contributed to a legacy that is as much about empowerment as it is about entertainment. In the end, the revelation of her salary is not the most important part of the story. What truly matters is what it represents, a moment in time when she recognized her worth and chose to act on it. It is a reminder that success is not just about reaching the top, but about how one navigates the path to get there. And for Judge Judy Sheindlin, that path was defined by resilience, determination, and an unshakable belief in her own value. Her final message lingers with quiet strength, that no matter where you start, no matter how others may perceive you, your worth is something you have the power to define. And sometimes, it takes a moment of feeling insulted to truly understand just how much you deserve. And in the quiet after those reflections, when the spotlight fades and the conversation shifts from headlines to meaning, the story of Judge Judy Sheindlin settles into something even more enduring than success. It becomes a lesson-etched in experience. At 83, she no longer speaks from a place of ambition, but from a place of certainty. The journey behind Judge Judy is no longer about proving her worth to networks or audiences. It is about understanding that worth in a way that cannot be taken away or diminished by any contract or negotiation. There is a quiet power in how she now frames those early years, the ones where the offers felt insulting, where her value was questioned, and where the system seemed unwilling to fully recognize what she brought to the table. Those moments, once sources of frustration, have become the foundation of her perspective. She no longer views them as setbacks, but as necessary challenges that force her to sharpen her instincts, to trust her judgment, and to develop the resilience that would ultimately define her career. She reflects on how easily people measure success in numbers, ratings, salaries, contracts, without considering the journey behind them. But for her, the real achievement was never just a financial outcome. It was the ability to stand firm when it mattered most, to say no when it would have been easy to say yes, and to demand recognition in an environment that did not readily offer it. Those choices, she suggests, were far more valuable than any paycheck, because they shaped the trajectory of everything that followed. These final thoughts. There's also a sense of passing something forward, a desire to leave behind not just a legacy of television success, but a message for those who come after her. She speaks, indirectly but unmistakably, to anyone who has ever felt underestimated or undervalued. Her story becomes a reminder that the way others perceive you does not define your worth, and that the courage to challenge those perceptions can change everything. It is a message grounded not in theory, but in lived experience. The irony of her revelation lingers. A woman who would go on to become one of the highest-paid figures in television once felt that her compensation did not reflect her true value. It is a contradiction that underscores a central theme of a journey, that value is often invisible at first, recognized only after it has been proven beyond doubt. And even then, it requires the confidence to claim it, to insist on it, and to protect IT today as the narrative reaches its natural conclusion. What remains is not the shock of a number or the intrigue of a headline, but the clarity of a lesson. The story of Judge Judy Sheindlin is ultimately about ownership of one's career, one's decisions, and one's sense of self-worth. It is about understanding that success is not handed out fairly or evenly, and that those who achieve it often do so by refusing to accept less than they deserve. And so, the final image is not of a courtroom or television set, but of a woman who has come to fully understand her own journey. The so-called insulting salary is no longer a point of contention. It is a symbol, a reminder of where she began, and how far she was willing to go to ensure that her value was recognized. In that sense, it becomes one of the most important parts of her story, not because of what it was, but because of what it taught her in the end. Her voice carries a quiet but undeniable truth, that knowing your worth is one of the most powerful tools you can possess, and that sometimes the moments that feel the most unfair are the ones that push you to rise higher than you ever imagined. And as the story settles into its final echoes, there is a sense that what Judge Judy Sheindlin has revealed goes far beyond a headline about money. It becomes a reflection on an entire lifetime of navigating power, perception, and purpose. At this stage in her life, the urgency that once drove her has softened into something more deliberate, more thoughtful. She is no longer reacting to the world around her. Instead, she is interpreting it, drawing meaning from experiences that once felt immediate but now feel instructive. The journey of Judge Judy is, in many ways, a mirror of that transformation. From something that began as an opportunity into something that became a defining legacy, she speaks, almost indirectly, about the emotional cost of constantly needing to prove oneself. In an industry where perception often outweighs reality, where first impression can dictate long-term outcomes, the burden of being underestimated